It's one of the few times that I encourage talking. It's just nice to see a whole bunch of people talk about music, and then as soon as the baton's back up, boom, we're ready to go. It's pretty eye-opening to the high school kids. They're like, you let them talk.
Yeah, don't get used to it. Hello, and welcome to episode 21 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of July 15th, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including a respectful nod to the Peggy spin, a report from Keene, another band-related internet rabbit hole of the week, and my conversation this week doubles as PR. I'm your host, Rob Hamilton. Hello, dear listener. Podcast guests and talk show guests are usually brought onto a program to plug one of their projects, a TV show, a movie, new book, something. And possibly for the first time on this podcast, I have done that very thing. My guest for the week is plugging a project that I think you may wish to avail yourself of. But the difference here is I'm plugging it too, because I'm involved, at least a tiny bit. So, shameless self-promotion coming at you from two directions at once. Cool. We'll probably talk about other stuff as well. So, go find that bag full of clothespins. This gig is outdoors and it's going to be windy. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Half Moon Bay, California. A nod to the reporting of the Half Moon Bay Review on this story. On July 4th, Steve Chandler conducted the sit-down marching band during Half Moon Bay's 4th of July celebration for the 37th and final time. The sit-down marching band gathered spontaneously for the Independence Day holiday without auditions or rehearsals. In 1984, the band joined that 4th of July parade for the first time. A couple of years later, the group decided it might be more comfortable to sit on a flatbed truck rather than walk. Shortly thereafter, the band was assigned a stationary location right next to City Hall. Chandler said, quote, "We didn't get to play enough when we were in the parade. We played 40 pieces today, but only 2 when we were in the parade." The original conductor of the band was a member of the Coast Guard, which at first granted him time off for Independence Day, but a few years later, the service did need him on duty on the holiday. About taking up the baton, after having played tuba with the sit-down marching band, Chandler remarked, quote, "I said I would do if needed, just until they found someone better." The 84-year-old Chandler has worked in retail, in real estate, and as a fiduciary, but says music is what keeps him happy. Now retired, he was recently elected president of his Residents Association, but other than that, he said, he's looking to relax a little. Dateline, Boston, Massachusetts. On this story, my thanks to the reporting of Steve Rondonero and Chris Weber from Drum Corps International. On Sunday, July 7th, Margaret Peggy Twiggs, whose namesake flag spinning technique revolutionized color guards across the marching music activity, died after a more than decade-long battle with progressive supranuclear palsy, a neurodegenerative disease. She was 72 years old. In a letter nominating Twiggs for induction into the Drum Corps International Hall of Fame, Michael Cesario wrote, quote, "I can think of nobody who has had a more direct effect on the technical training, accuracy, and precision of modern color guard than Peggy. She singularly bridged the gap between old and new drum corps styles, creating champions by emphasizing achievement and personal growth." Twiggs was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2005. Twiggs first marched with the Immaculate Conception Reveries in 1967, a corps which became the 27th Lancers from Revere, Massachusetts, her hometown. After aging out, she became an instructional staff member. In a time when color guard equipment work was much more militaristic than it is now, Twiggs' flag innovation, the Peggy spin, revolutionized guard work, fostering growth in focus, strength, and stamina. In the 27th Lancers' early history, Twigg began to develop routines for flag performers. Instructors asked her to create a trick flag line. Adding a new level of technicality to the marching music activity, those 2-7 guards revolutionized drum corps and became legendary. Twiggs instructed the Garfield Cadets color guard during the 1980s. She also taught numerous indoor color guards. In 1978, she became involved in the inaugural season of Winter Guard International. Dale Powers, director of color guard with WGI, said, quote, "Peggy leaves such a positive mark on both the drum corps and color guard activity. She not only created some of the finest flag lines within the marching arts, but she also impacted the lives of so many by making every student she taught feel valued and respected." And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Now we'll take a quick water break and meet you on the other side. Do stay with us, please. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, after having spent a lot of time in last week's episode hyping up the New England Band Directors Institute, well, I'm pleased to say it did not disappoint. NEBDI had been on hiatus since before the COVID pandemic. Last year, the New Hampshire Band Directors Association successfully fired it back up, with about 6 attendees attending workshops and forming a band full of band directors to read down some newly published concert band arrangements and spending time with the composer Michael Markowski, who was the featured clinician of the weekend. For a restart, it wasn't a bad turnout, or at least the organizers seemed to think so. I remember in the COVID before times, racing to get my registration materials completed while there was still time, since they capped the attendance at 125 or 130, something like that. Turns out, word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. Now, where have I heard that before? But this past week at Keene State College, there were more than double the number of attendees from last year, and this year's featured clinician was Randall Standridge. If you're currently involved with the wind band activity, you have probably heard of this fella. He carries with him an enormous reputation for writing interesting and accessible new compositions for bands, and he did not disappoint in this regard. We sight-read a number of his pieces, most of which are about to be published. Last year, I quietly earmarked one of Michael Markowski's works to have my community band play, Brooklyn Air, and for sure it's been a very successful addition to our repertoire. By the end of the Standridge session this past Tuesday afternoon, I had chuckled mightily at a number of his Arkansas accent-inflected quips, and had picked out at least 2 or 3 items of his that my band is going to have a look at. Other happenings of this past week that I experienced included a session describing a way to get an entire middle school band to become young composers, and it wasn't just a pie in the sky, everyone can do this sort of thing. It was a set of concrete lesson plans and strategies and rubrics to enable 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students to write duets and quartets, 8-measure ones, but it still counts, and in at least one case, to write a 90-second piece for her middle school band to play. It was on video. It was good. Another session was a clinic talking about strategies and tactics for developing young tuba and euphonium students. There was a lot of talk about air, and also about starting kids on instruments that actually work so that they don't encounter difficulties and think that they're the problem. Wish I'd had that advantage as a beginner trumpet. The presenters were the members of the Legato Pesante Tuba Quartet. That was them. They were good. I wish they'd played more, but the session wasn't all about them, just by them. Megan McFadden, the conductor of the Smith College Wind Ensemble, among other resume bullet points, ran a session about wise ways to allocate rehearsal time properly, not just in an individual rehearsal, but over the course of a series of rehearsals leading up to a concert. Not quite a 30,000-foot perspective, but maybe a 10,000-foot one. She is yet another conductor whose band I would like to be in one day, if such a thing could be possible. She also conducted the Grade 3 to 5 newly published concert band works reading session, and there was great emphasis this year on works by composers who come from marginalized communities, composers of color, female composers, LGBTQ composers. Not all of the pieces we read hit everybody where they lived, but I suspect everybody went away smiling at least one of them. And that was true when the reading sessions featured works by mostly white men. Don't get me wrong, I love me some T. Kelly, some Robert Sheldon, some J. Bocook. But we happily are living in a moment where we're starting to figure out that there are some creative people out there who don't all resemble Mozart and Beethoven, and who haven't maybe gotten the press they deserve, yet. And their band compositions ideas are just as valid, thank you. 3 words in particular: Shenandoah, Omar Thomas. Wow. But the session that particularly struck me was called Supporting Lifelong and Community Music Making. Its upshot was, let's figure out why people who did band when they were in school didn't continue to participate after they got out into the big world. And then let's work out what we can do to encourage people to get back in, or in fact, never stop. One of the presenters, Keene State music professor and NEBDI coordinator John Hart, conducted an actual research study and found that, among other things, those people who did continue to make music as adults did it primarily for reasons like enjoyment, fun, music making as community, and self-care, as in mental and emotional self-care, and relaxation, and an escape from the day-to-day grind. One of the session's other presenters was Donna Morse, the conductor of New Hampshire's Nelson Town Band. She's also on the board of directors of an organization called New Horizons International. There are lots of New Horizons ensembles out there in the world. They're for people who are picking up their instruments again after having not played for a while, or for people who want to learn a new instrument later in life. When New Horizons participants, who are mostly retirees, were asked why they like to play with those groups, some of their answers included, it keeps their minds sharp, they get to be with people, which is to say, it gets them out of the house. And that's not really a joke. Their band schedule gets them out and engaging with the world. That can be a big deal. And, for some of them, the experience of making music later in life creates something of a nostalgia effect. They are happily recreating the experience of their time in their school band. And yes, the lifelong learning buzzword was thrown around, and it's not insignificant. Something about the day we stop learning is the day we stop living, some aphorisms very much like that. In fact, all that research showed that the three dominant reasons people keep making music are community, making music with others, and lifelong learning, in that order. So, the presenters wondered, how can we actively promote lifelong musicking? By we, they meant music educators, since the overwhelming majority of NEBDI attendees fall into that category. And in particular, in what ways have music educators not done this very well historically? For one thing, sometimes we, have emphasized performance as the goal. Also, we've worked so hard to emphasize the importance of continuing to include music and the arts as part of school curricula. Go back a few episodes to my rant about this, as the Franklin, Massachusetts voters opted not to override a tax law measure which resulted in a draconian reduction in its school's fine arts faculty. We've put so much emphasis on music in schools that it's seemed as if we're saying that school is the only important place for it. So we can talk about it all we want, but, said the session's presenters, the power of modeling is more useful and potentially more powerful. And the delivery vehicle for this, the way we can model lifelong music making, can be community ensembles. At which point in the session, I sat there and grinned my lunatic grin. In my case, not only do I rehearse a community band on Wednesday nights, but on Thursday nights I rehearse my little church choir. Two sides, same coin. Instrumental, choral, secular, sacred, doesn't matter in this case. It all serves the purposes of community in the socializing sense, making music with others, and yeah, we learn a bit about a lot of stuff along the way, sometimes by accident, sometimes not. Lines right up with this podcast, I know. Yeah, I'm getting better at shameless self-promotion, can you tell? Heck, I spent the entire 3 days wearing the NEBDI registration name tag and a name tag with the BandWagon logo and a QR code that sent people straight to heyband.podbean.com. If you're listening to this podcast because of that QR code, hello, welcome. All right, let's observe a brief fermata, and then, hey, more shameless self-promotion in the form of my trio section conversation. Hope you'll stick around. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, I'm joined by a gentleman off of whose music education career I have bounced from time to time over about the last close to 30 years. Sometimes those bounces have been in the form of a hey, how are you, on our way from one session to another at the Massachusetts Music Ed Conference or the New England Band Directors Institute, which I've referred to a lot in the last couple of episodes here. Sometimes he and I have been on the same teaching team, and this time we will absolutely talk about this one particular joint band project that is a genuine current event this coming week. All that and so much more. Please help me welcome to the program Craig Hay. Hello, Craig.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I would say I've set up the probably main topic of conversation in a pretty unsubtle fashion, but it does deserve a bit more substantive setup, not so much a detail-less tease. Therefore, I'll start with my standard set of opening questions, better to get people an idea of who they're dealing with here. So, what is your primary instrument?
So my primary instrument is clarinet, also play saxophone and flute. I grew up in Carlisle, Massachusetts. So my first teacher was Janet Peckham from way back when. Went to Concord Carlisle, had Mr. Dentino and Mr. Puglisi, and then it was off to UMass, where I studied clarinet with Mr. Sussman, and then I started taking lessons with David Martins from UMass, was at UMass Lowell. But
Mm.
yeah, and then through my master's degree at University of Illinois, and just had fun playing ever since.
So, what bands have you been active with in your life, whether it's playing or waving a stick?
Well, obviously at UMass with symphony band and wind ensemble, did a season of marching band that was very wet. Through my association with Professor Martins, played in Met Winds for about 10 years. And then, did sort of the musicians local thing. I've played in the Ashby band, the Fitchburg military band, and invited here and there and everywhere to play when someone needed somebody. And then about 20 years ago, my predecessor in Hopkinton, Steve Ivaro, started the Hopkinton Community Summer Band and played in that. And then when he retired, I asked him if he wanted to continue conducting, and he's like, "Nope, your job."
So, your current band related role or roles are?
The what we call the subject matter leader at Hopkinton High School for the music department K through 12, conduct the high school concert band and symphonic band. Yeah, and then this title pushed on me to conduct the Hopkinton Community Summer Band.
Which has been going for 20 years, and that's the point of this, or at least that's the point of the little project that I so unsubtly referred to before. Were you involved with the band straight through?
Yep, I've been involved when Steve decided that he wanted to start the group. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe there were two reasons he started the group. And one was, as you said, NEBDI related years ago at Plymouth State. I don't remember who we were talking to. It could have been Gary Cochran. I don't know. But just talked about, the joys of a community summer group, rehearse a few weeks, put on a performance, and just have fun and see who shows up. It was about the same time that the Hopkinton Parks and Rec were looking to put on a summer concert series. And I don't know who was on the board at that point, but they were like, yeah, we should have our own town band. Towns around us have bands.
Yeah.
Um, we should have our own town band. I'm like, okay. Uh, Steve was like, yeah, we're gonna start a town band. I'm like, fine, I'll play. That was about it. So it's been going for 20 years. Obviously a COVID interruption, but we've got some players in the group that have played all 20 years. We've got a few people that have come and gone and come back again. Anything from upper middle school kids to, I think, our oldest member this year is a 80-year-old tenor saxophonist.
Having seen a number of videos of concert performances, I suppose one of the questions that occurred to me since I saw that the range of participants, as far as demographics, age, and probably experience and whatnot, was kind of all over the place. I had wondered whether the original forming of the band was in line with one particular one from up north central that I was thinking of, which the point of which was to have a standing wind band that would provide maybe more advanced playing opportunities for high school kids locally. This sounds like it was more a case of, we need a band, let's make one, or we need a band, go make one.
Yeah, kind of like that. And I think the hardest part about the group is we do have everywhere from, kids who've played for 3 or 4 years to professionals to people who, like, I know this year we have a few people in the group that are dusting off 20 to 30 years of dust off the case and going for it because their own children are playing and they want to play along with them. So I think the greatest challenge has been, picking a program where I can push some of the pros and make it accessible to everyone else, so that they're having some fun and, enjoy that thing that we call band.
In various areas of my life musically, I have walked the tightrope between wiping out the less experienced people and boring the people who could be professionals if they weren't. Yeah.
I think one of the good things with a lot of the literature now is all the pop tunes are pretty easily accessible. They write them in flex scoring
Yeah.
so that you can give someone who hasn't played in 20 years like a part three, and they are so happy because they can make it from beginning to end.
Mm.
Whereas, if you gave them, a third clarinet part in a more traditional piece, they'd still struggle. They may not like it as much.
And you might not get them back. Yeah.
You might not get them back. So this definitely helps bring them back, bring them in. They're pretty good with the marches. Obviously all the medleys, from whatever era you're doing, they have fun with that. And then every once in a while we throw like a new piece at them, or, give them something a little challenging. And we try to keep it like, okay, this is our stretch piece this year, and that really pushes the pros and gets the people to challenge themselves a little bit and feel like, well, maybe I can do a harder piece, or, I know my limit.
Do you find that from year to year you get continuity from within personnel?
I would say it's about maybe 50 to 60%. A
Like
lot
you're
of it depends on family summer vacations. A lot of it depends on, especially with the more advanced players, what gigs are coming up. I've been very lucky over the years to have a trumpet player come in who is, very well known, and, usually takes a break during the summer from touring. And he'll come and sit in and play. This is not one of those summers, but I really appreciate it. He just, he understands the joy of what it's like to be in a community group. And I think he also understands that it's nice to play a second or third part and play it really well, and like have
Mm.
that 14 or 15-year-old kid hear their part being played really well and be like, I gotta match that, or wow, I can do that. And that's a really important part. So it's good, but I would say between 50 and 60%. I looked at the list over the years of people that have come and gone. People have moved away. We've had people move in. We've had people try it for a year and they end up being like, no, we're really more of an audience. And that's perfectly fine, come and watch and enjoy. So
There are bands that get together for a limited engagement, and that's pretty much it. And there are also bands who try to look from year to year to year and say, okay, are we improving? And you don't have to be one or the other. I wondered if that perspective was one that you focus on or that you don't worry about.
I think we do try to get better every year. I think, we have to go through those initial couple rehearsals to see what kind of group we are, and then make the adjustments. I think for the people who've been in the group many years, they're pretty quick to make an adjustment and, help those people around them adjust, that gentle, I think you're playing everything too loud. It's okay to blend in.
F sharp second valve.
F sharp, yes. Here are some pencils. Uh, So it's nice that we have those people involved with the group because they're really looking forward to having a couple good performances, and they realize that the turnaround is pretty quick. It's not like school where we'll have, a couple months to really
Yeah.
hammer something out.
And good to have people who know how to play the game, who
Yeah,
will not sit there and say, oh, come on, people.
yeah. That they're just willing to help one another out and enjoy it and have fun. I mean, it's one of the few times that I encourage talking.
Mm-hmm.
It's just nice to see a whole bunch of people talk about music, and then as soon as the baton's back up, boom, we're ready to go.
Mm.
It's pretty eye-opening to the high school kids. They're like, you let them talk.
Yeah, don't get used to it.
But they're talking about, oh, so
So here we come toward the 20th anniversary year, and he asked, knowing the answer perfectly well, what's going on?
so with the 20th anniversary of the Hopkinton Community Summer Band, we have a couple things that we're doing. First is Steve Yavaro is coming in to conduct our piece that we always finish with, or at least I thought we always finished with, but then we look back at the YouTube videos and we didn't finish with it in our first year. But we always end with the Harold Walters classic instant concert.
Yes,
So he's going to come in and conduct that. And then the idea came from one of our band members, John Ritz, who recently retired and was spending a little bit of time at the Hopkinton Historical Society and found a piece of music titled Hopkinton by Captain Abraham Wood from Northborough, Mass. And it is a church plain song from the late 1700s, early 1800s, whatever. Not very welcoming because the lyrics start off with the word death. Come to Hopkinton, death. But the idea was, once he found it, was like, we should arrange this out for band. And then throughout the year, just did a little work with the Hopkinton Cultural Council, and in turn, the Massachusetts Cultural Council received a grant. And then we reached out to our ranger extraordinaire that we know to write a new version of Captain Wood's Hopkinton as a premiere piece for our concert on the 21st.
And that is the bit that I have managed not to spoil. He's me! So, for me, it was an intriguing project to hear about, just because I love that kind of stuff. Here's a hymn tune. Let's make something out of it. But 9 years ago, a very similar project came up from a very similar place. And I think the thing that struck me this time around was that the previous time around, you all sent over a hymn tune that was called Hopkinton. It was a bouncy little thing, and we made something out of it with various compositional tricks and silliness. The hymn tune that came at me this time around was a number of things, not terribly different in terms of, it was kind of your basic hymn tune, sacred harp sort of a thing. You had to go digging and realize, oh, the melody's in what looks like the tenor part. Okay, because the soprano part isn't as melodic as it could be. So that was a similarity. But here you had, I think almost immediately you talked about the lyrics were not exactly as inspiring as they could have been. I don't think I realized that they started with death, and not even a death wears thy sting kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's a minor key.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, not every hymn clearly is in a major key anyway. And so we would like to make a piece to celebrate and to commemorate the 20th anniversary of this group and this idea. A minor key, huh? So I know I sat there and scratched my head, not quite till it bled, but for a little while thinking, what exactly? The tune wasn't exactly Foursquare either, but happily we found a time to sit down and we chatted a little bit about what sorts of things could happen. And I think that conversation genuinely helped me kind of figure, okay, where are we going to go with this? So it ended up moving from minor to major. And of course, if you're going to do that, the automatically obvious title is Hopkinton Rising, because
Right.
the third is going to rise. I didn't think that was too on the nose. But it's been yet another fun project, partly because as I've done most of my arranging life, I've written for people I know. I've written for friends. So in that way, it's not just a gig, and it's not that you put any less effort into an item for somebody you don't know. But if it's important to the people that you know and that you're friends with, then it's got an extra layer of importance to it, I think. It's been fun. I was pleased when I sent over a draft and there were next to no notes coming back, which was great. Not for my ego, but just because, okay, so that reflected the conversation that we had, and that reflected some of the things that you were talking about. So cool.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, like when we asked you to write the other Hopkinton, which was by William Billings, for Steve's retirement, you were also the natural choice to like, hey, here's part 2.
The revenge.
Yeah. And John's been doing a little bit of further digging. He found a book similar to Billings' Continental Harmony, which was sort of like the New England harmony hymnal book, written by another person that I had never heard of before, where Captain Wood's Hopkinton is in it. But a few pages later, the author of this book has also written a tune titled Hopkinton, because, that was the craze of the day. If you write song for a town, just title it name of the town.
Yeah.
But what it also confirmed, which we never knew, we took a stab of with the William Billings Hopkinton, because he wrote for all over New England. We didn't know if it was Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. We're just like, oh, well, we'll claim it for ourselves for right now. But what it does is it sort of solidifies that it actually was written for Hopkinton, Mass, which was really kind of cool. So, yeah, we claimed it. And now, truthfully, yes, it is ours.
Bit of a relief on top of that.
Yes.
Cool. So remind me, does the Hopkinton Community Summer Band do one gig per summer? Is that what I remember properly?
We usually do one, maybe 2 gigs per summer. We have a alumnus who works for the Woo Sox, so we've been able to play at Polar Park. Westboro did a summer band group thing a few years ago, or before COVID. We did that, but normally we just play at the Common. It's a one and done.
So this particular one and done is where this piece is going to get put up, and that will be the Sunday that follows this podcast drop date.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, if you're listening to this on a Monday or a Tuesday, the 15th or the 16th, the afternoon of remind me.
The 21st on the Hopkinton Town Common, and concert begins at 5. Just pray no rain.
And boy, has that ever been a thing in the last, I don't know, for sure the last couple of summers.
We will actually, the high school auditorium is booked. So if it is a downpour, we'll be playing inside and we'll broadcast it, invite people in and broadcast over the town community access.
So whether or not you come and tell them this podcast sent you, you get in free anyway, regardless.
Right. And another thing that's kind of cool is doing a commission with a summer community group. They get done from time to time, I think, but in all my years of playing, I think the only one I did was with Fitchburg Military Band, and they had David Schaefer write River and the Rock, which is now a grade 3 piece, I think, available to purchase for anniversary for Fitchburg. And it was really cool because, he was there at the first performance and, very approachable.
It can be a risk, I would imagine, with a community band, and that's not to dump on community bands, but again, as we talked about, the playing levels are all over the place. And can you ask for a grade 3 if you know you got people who are not there and that sort of thing? With the Fitchburg Military Band, I think I'm not misspeaking when I say that that's a pack of professionals, or it's a union band. So, one time I went to see the Leominster Colonial Band, and I saw before the performance started, Steve Pierini was talking with everybody on the stage and pointing out, okay, measure 23, we're going to do this, and look for the coda and this and this. And knowing nothing, I said, don't you work that out in rehearsal? And afterward, I'm talking to a couple of my friends who were in the band. He says, yeah, we don't rehearse, we just show and go. And so a commission for a group maybe closer to that level of playing, you can get away with things as a composer. And another kind of neat challenge that was part of this for me, I know, was having seen video of the band and having seen that there are middle school kids in there. Not many, but there are. And having been involved with the community band up close and personal for now a couple of years, I have a better idea of that. But it puts another layer of interest, not necessarily a challenge, yes, but interest for me as somebody putting notes down on the page. Every note, every phrase I put down, I think to myself, is this doable considering they only have this limited number of rehearsals and all that? It's fun in a way. It's a fun challenge.
And it has been a fun challenge. Like, I didn't rehearse the piece the first week because it was like, just get everyone in, get them comfortable. And in the second week, when we introduced the piece, I just wanted to do sort of a quick run through. So one of the things you gave me was like the little motives that you had written. And, I didn't even go over what the original tune was like. I'm just like, let's just try it out. And it was very interesting to see the faces because they're so used to playing tunes they know. Or if they don't know how to play it, they're enough band people that like, oh yeah, I've heard that tune before. I've been I've been at a concert and listened to it. And so when you're doing something totally brand new that they've never heard, I was a little scared. I'm like, what are they gonna do? But we did it section by section, and then we did a run through, obviously pretty rough, but I think they could get the general idea. And that gave me a good idea of how to plan the following rehearsal, and then they started hearing the bits and pieces out of it. So last week, I quickly scored out just the hymn so that they could hear the original hymn. Talked about the lyrics, not the Hopkinton Marathon, it all starts here, happy, cheery. Went through the little motives with them, and then we worked backwards. I'm like, well, these people are here because it's a community band, they have fun, so let's start in major.
Yeah.
So we worked the final section, and they could hear the 5 measures from the end where you have like the church bells.
There's that. Yeah, I have this stupid little compositional decoder ring thing where I can take letters and turn them into numbers and turn those numbers into pitches out of this scale or that and see if any motifs kind of come out of it. And so, yeah, I tried with the letters in the name of the town Hopkinton, and that it was a bit too long and it was all over the
Yeah.
place and nothing really flowed, but the zip code worked and HCSB worked. And I said, score, let's go with this. So, yeah.
So, and then they could start hearing those little things, and then then they get the idea of like, oh yeah, this is colonial time, revolutionary time. So there's the drum and the flutes, and the brass picked up right away that we're not going for like this big resonant sound. So when then they come in their little section, there's space between the notes, and so it's really starting to like take shape. And I think the second time we played through it, in that second rehearsal we played through it, hearing the piece come to life, I think was really one of those cool things where you just see a lot more eyes open up and they're like, yeah, this is something brand new and we get to present it. That's going to be really fun.
I will look forward to hearing it, partly because I put down notes on the computer page and the computer gives them back to me, and it at least tells me that there aren't any clams that I can't edit and whatnot. But goes without saying, and this is nothing that anybody listening to this won't know, and it's certainly nothing we don't know, is computers ain't humans. And it takes a long time to program in expressive things, and there are things you can get out of a human performance that computers will never do, and that's something that gives me a great comfort. On top of which, I'm looking forward to these particular humans,
Yeah.
because of all the reasons we've talked about. This will be real cool.
Yeah. And the best thing about the group is it's easily 90% live in town. You have kids who are growing up in town who like know nothing of the history other than that the marathon starts there.
Yeah.
You've got people like John Ritz who've lived in town for quite some time and are now diving in, now that he's got time, really diving into, the history of the town. And what I think is even cooler is like the musical history of the town. And then, I think it's something that just adds to the community that we've got some music written for us. We've made it come alive. You get to hear it. I'll probably program Hopkinton Rising for our December concert just to get all the kids at the school singing it. It could even be a piece that we do, like we'll get the 8th graders to learn it too, and I bring them up for the high school concert and have them enjoy it and bring their parents in. So, something fun like that. That's the cool thing I like about your piece right now, is that it's accessible. Everyone's playing, everyone's got their part, and they're like, ooh, we're doing something kind of cool.
I am genuinely pleased to hear that. One of the things that I like to try to do is to make it sound harder than it is. And to the average person out there who hasn't done this, it's perfectly fine, but they don't know.
Right.
So, no, I will absolutely look forward to that, and I will invite anybody who's listening to this. If you're listening to this after the 21st, boy, you missed something. I'm convinced you missed something.
Yeah, they will have missed something. It's good. It's good. It's coming along really nice.
So now that we've talked about this project and this band a lot, let's get back to stuff people didn't know about you, because we haven't talked about you that overly much. So I'm going to use my usual round of questions whose answers never get on a resume ever. And the first one is, what's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played or conducted?
I think my all-time favorite piece that I've played was with Met Winds, and we did the Lord of the Rings, the Johann Demai, and he was there.
Oh,
His tempos were a little faster because it was his vision. But I think just being on the edge of your seat and playing that with him there, and that was just a blast. It was just the adrenaline. You remember that adrenaline rush. As far as conducting, also an adrenaline rush. Years ago, it was the first group of kids that I had from 5th grade, and then when they were going from 8th to 9th, I moved up to the high school. It was their senior year, and we did Sam Hazo's Arabesque, and we're given the opportunity to play that at Symphony Hall. And I just had killer flute player, killer oboist. It was the right group of kids. The best part about it, and we always go back and we listen to the recording, and as I tell every band, that it's our job to reach the audience. It's our job to just make them know what's going on, that we're here and we're playing. It's that first big chord is just with the drums and really loud. In the recording at Symphony Hall, we woke somebody up. So you hear the boom, and then you hear Ah! I'm glad we woke them up because they got to hear a wonderful performance of Arabesque. So that was my favorite time conducting.
Score. Is there a piece of band music that you haven't played but you would like to?
There's a whole lot of really cool new stuff coming out. I think the one that like catches my ear right now is, especially with the kids that I have, is I'd love to do the Omar Thomas, I believe it's called Come Sunday.
Yeah.
I've got a tenor player who's soulful enough to do that beginning. It's just he's a thoughtful kid and he's a thoughtful musician. So I'd kind of love to do that. We'll see if we're ready for it. I think that's the big piece. But I think one of the cool things, and you probably see it too on Facebook, is the amount of people doing self-promotion and self-publication. Some of it's okay, and then every once in a while you just hit a piece you're like, yeah, that would be kind of cool.
Is there a band that you would like to perform with that you haven't because you're not the right age or you're not in the right geographical location, you don't live in the right time period?
I guess I was always a little bit jealous of my UMass classmates who have gone on to perform, either in President's Own or Pershing Zone or down the street in the Coast Guard in New London. I think we've been really lucky to know some just world-class musicians that we went to school with who were able to land these gigs, and you just listen to them play and you're just like, wow, what a fun gig that would be. Go back in time. Maybe if I actually practiced a little bit more.
I hear ya. Well, it has been great talking about this Hopkinton Summer Band project, which could become somebody's favorite band story for all we know. So thanks for jumping in and doing this. We'll put links to the summer band and all that sort of good stuff into the show notes, as is custom around here. Educator, conductor, Craig Hay, thanks again for offering up a bit of your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, on the other side of this next break, a bit more BandWagon. Thanks so much for staying with me. Here comes the dogfight. In this week's dogfight, I'm back with another band-related internet rabbit hole of the week. This online excursion, which you may be inspired to take yourself, is with the Waterloo Municipal Band from Waterloo, Iowa. The band was first conceived by Waterloo musicians serving on a Navy vessel during World War I. The group eventually became the Waterloo American Legion Band, and shortly afterward was renamed the Waterloo Municipal Band. In the spring of 1994, the band was reorganized and incorporated as a non-profit organization under the name of the Waterloo Community Concert Band. The band performed traditional outdoor concerts each year during June and July, and in 1994 it was selected to be the honor band at the Iowa Bandmasters Convention. Recently, the band returned to the name of the Waterloo Municipal Band. Current conductors include Danny Gallion and Justin Mertz, who are the director and associate director of bands, respectively, at the University of Northern Iowa. Most of the videos of the Waterloo Municipal Band are of their June and July Friday night concerts at the River Loop Amphitheater, an impressive outdoor performance venue on the banks of the Cedar River, which flows through the city of Waterloo. Traditionally, the band closes its concerts with Carmen Dragon's America the Beautiful arrangement, and one regular feature of those concerts is a concert march about midway through the program, during which the band's president leads a line of youthful audience members in a parade around and sometimes through the band. The usual repertoire includes marches, Broadway and film medleys, and wind band classics. Their conductors serve as the band's narrators and masters of ceremonies in a way that's entertaining and genuinely informative about their musical selections, composers, musical content, and historical background. In this week's show notes, I've included a link to a YouTube playlist full of those summer concerts. I think you will not be sorry you spent time with these hour-long videos. Notably, the Waterloo Municipal Band will celebrate its 100th anniversary in 2026. Okay, one last break, and then we'll hit the home stretch. Thanks for continuing to listen. To wrap up this week, let's take the coda. This week's coda is an acknowledgement that this episode, as it worked out, focused quite largely on the idea of community bands. If there's a community band you know that you think deserves a plug, since it's good to celebrate such things, and heck, every community band can use a little publicity for recruitment purposes. Please do toss me a clue via our contact links, which are coming up now. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like, what you think might change. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to our news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Craig Hay, can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well, because as we've said, word of mouth is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please rate and review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton. Detail, Fallout,